The late afternoon sun painted the Missouri plains in shades of gold and amber when Amelia Warren first saw the horses grazing near the creek, and something deep in her artist's soul whispered that she had to capture them on paper before the light changed. She had been traveling with her father's merchant wagon train for 3 weeks now, enduring the dust and monotony of the trail from Boston to St. Louis, Missouri, where they planned to establish a trading post in the spring of 1875. The horses were magnificent, their coats gleaming in the slanted light, muscles rippling beneath skin as they moved with an elegance that seemed almost choreographed. Setting down her leather satchel beneath a cottonwood tree, Amelia pulled out her sketchbook and charcoal pencils. Her fingers trembled slightly with excitement as she began to draw, her hand moving in quick, confident strokes across the paper. She had always found solace in art, especially during the difficult years after her mother's death when she was 14. Now at 22, sketching had become more than a hobby. It was how she understood the world, how she processed beauty and pain alike. The horses seemed unaware of her presence as she worked, capturing the arch of their necks, the power in their legs, the way their tails swished lazily in the warm air. One stallion in particular caught her attention, a sorrel with a white blaze down his face and 4 white socks. He stood slightly apart from the others, alert and proud, as if he knew he was being watched. She was so absorbed in her work that she did not hear the approach of boots on grass until a deep voice spoke directly behind her. "Those are my horses you are drawing." Amelia startled, her pencil slipping and leaving an unintended mark across the page. She turned quickly to find a man standing a few feet away, his shadow falling across her sketchbook. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar beneath a worn brown hat. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, and they regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and something else she could not quite name. He wore dusty riding clothes and leather chaps, and there was a quiet confidence in the way he stood, feet planted firmly as if he belonged to this land as much as the horses did. "I apologize," Amelia said, rising to her feet and brushing grass from her dark blue traveling dress. "I did not realize they belonged to anyone. I thought perhaps they were wild." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile but close. "Wild horses would not let you get this near. These are mine, part of my string. I run a ranch about 2 miles east of here." He gestured toward the horizon where rolling hills met the sky. "The name is Mason Drake." "Amelia Warren," she replied, extending her hand in greeting. His handshake was firm but gentle, his palm calloused from years of hard work. "I truly meant no disrespect. I simply could not resist." "They are beautiful animals." Mason stepped closer, looking down at her sketchbook, and Amelia felt suddenly self-conscious. She had shown her work to gallery owners back in Boston, had even sold a few pieces, but something about this man's quiet appraisal made her nervous. His eyes moved over the page, taking in the careful lines, the shading that gave depth and life to the horses she had drawn. "You have a real gift," he said finally, and the genuine admiration in his voice made warmth bloom in her chest. "I have never seen anyone capture the way a horse moves like this. It is like they might step right off the paper." "Thank you," Amelia said softly. "I have been drawing since I was a child. Animals have always been my favorite subject. They have an honesty to them, a purity of purpose." Mason nodded, his gaze shifting from the sketch to her face. "What brings an artist from back east to Missouri? You do not sound like you are from around here." "My father is a merchant," she explained. "We are establishing a trading post in St. Louis. He believes there is opportunity here, with the railroad expanding and more settlers coming west. I confess I was reluctant to leave Boston at first, but there is something about this land. It has a wildness, a freedom I never knew existed. It can be harsh too, Mason said, his expression growing more serious. Beautiful but unforgiving. The winters are hard and the summers can be brutal. It takes a certain kind of person to thrive here. I suppose I will discover what kind of person I am, Amelia replied, meeting his eyes with a steadiness that surprised herself. There was a moment of silence between them, comfortable rather than awkward, as if they were both weighing something unseen. Would you like to meet them? Mason asked suddenly, nodding toward the horses. The horses, I mean, properly. Amelia's face lit up. I would love that. Mason whistled low and sharp, and the sorrel stallion she had been sketching lifted his head, ears pricking forward. He trotted over with surprising obedience, stopping just in front of Mason and nuzzling at his shirt pocket. Mason pulled out a chunk of dried apple and offered it on his palm. "This is Ranger," he said as the horse crunched contentedly. "He is the smartest of the bunch and knows it. Acts like he runs the whole ranch sometimes." Amelia reached out slowly, letting Ranger sniff her hand before she stroked his velvet soft nose. The horse exhaled warm breath against her palm, his large eyes watching her with gentle curiosity. "He is magnificent," she whispered, running her hand along his powerful neck. "I can see the intelligence in him." "I bred him myself," Mason said, and there was unmistakable pride in his voice. "His sire was a Mustang I caught 3 years back, tough as nails and fast as lightning. His dam was a thoroughbred mare I bought from a breeder in Kentucky. I am trying to create a line of horses that combine speed with endurance and intelligence." They spent the next hour together as the sun sank lower in the sky. Mason introduced her to each of his horses, telling their stories and quirks. There was Juniper, a bay mare with a sweet disposition who loved having her ears scratched. Cloud, a gray gelding who was afraid of chickens for some inexplicable reason. Dakota, a young filly still learning her manners. As Mason spoke, Amelia continued to sketch, filling page after page with studies of different poses and expressions. She learned that Mason was 26 years old and had inherited the ranch from his uncle 2 years prior. He ran cattle, but his true passion was horses. He had a small crew of ranch hands who helped with the day-to-day operations, but he preferred working alone when it came to training his animals. There was a quietness about him that Amelia found appealing, a sense that he measured his words carefully and spoke only when he had something worth saying. "Your wagon train will be worried about you," Mason said eventually, glancing at the darkening sky. "It is not wise to be out alone after nightfall. There are coyotes and occasionally wolves." Amelia looked around, realizing with a start that she had completely lost track of time. "You are right. My father will be frantic. Our camp is about a mile south, near the main trail." "I will escort you back," Mason said, already gathering Ranger's reins. The stallion had been ground tied nearby, patiently grazing. "You can ride with me if you like. It will be faster." The thought of riding with him, of sitting so close, made Amelia's heart beat faster. She nodded, tucking her sketchbook carefully into her satchel. Mason mounted Ranger with easy grace, then extended his hand down to her. She grasped it, placing her foot over his in the stirrup, and he pulled her up effortlessly behind him. She had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep her balance, and she could feel the solid warmth of him through his shirt, the steady rhythm of his breathing. They rode in silence through the gathering dusk, the landscape transforming around them. The sky deepened from blue to purple to indigo, and the first stars began to emerge. Amelia rested her cheek against Mason's back, breathing in the scent of leather and sage and something uniquely him. She had never felt quite like this before, this sense of rightness, of being exactly where she was meant to be. When they reached the wagon train camp, fires were already burning and several men stood watch at the perimeter. Her father, a stout man with graying hair and worry lines etched deep around his eyes, rushed forward the moment he saw her. "Amelia, thank God. Where have you been? I have had men searching everywhere." Arthur Warren's face was red with a mixture of relief and anger. "I am sorry, Papa," Amelia said as Mason helped her down from Ranger. "I was sketching and lost track of time. Mr. Drake was kind enough to escort me back safely." Arthur's expression shifted as he took in Mason, his eyes narrowing slightly in that protective way fathers have. "Warren, Arthur Warren," he said, extending his hand. "I am grateful to you for looking after my daughter. Mason Drake. I run the Drake Ranch east of here. Your daughter is quite talented. She was drawing my horses down by the creek." "Yes, well, she has always had her head in the clouds," Arthur said with a mixture of fondness and exasperation. "Thank you for bringing her back. Would you join us for supper? It is the least we can offer." Mason hesitated, glancing at Amelia, and she found herself hoping he would say yes. "I would be obliged," he said finally. The meal was simple fare, beans and salt pork and cornbread baked in Dutch ovens over the fire, but it was hearty and filling. Mason sat beside Amelia on a log, and they talked easily despite the watchful eyes of her father and several other men from the train. She learned more about his ranch, about his dreams of creating the finest horses in Missouri. He asked about her art, about Boston, about what she hoped to find in this new life. "I think I was searching for something," Amelia admitted, watching the firelight dance and flicker. "I just did not know what until I got here. There is space to breathe in this land, room to become whoever you are meant to be." "It allows that," Mason agreed. "But it also demands honesty. You cannot pretend to be something you are not out here. The land sees through it." After supper, Mason prepared to leave, mounting Ranger beneath a sky now thick with stars. "Will you be in St. Louis long?" he asked Amelia, who had walked with him to the edge of camp. "We should arrive in 3 days," she said. "My father has purchased property on the north side of town. We will be building the trading post and a house." "I come into St. Louis every few weeks for supplies," Mason said. "Perhaps I might call on you, if that would be acceptable." Amelia's heart soared. "I would like that very much." He touched the brim of his hat in farewell, his eyes holding hers for a long moment that seemed to contain 1,000 unspoken things. Then he turned Ranger and rode off into the darkness, leaving Amelia standing beneath the stars with her hand pressed to her chest, feeling her heart race with a feeling she was only beginning to recognize as love. The next 3 days passed in a blur of dust and travel. The wagon train made good time, following the well-worn trail into St. Louis. The city was larger than Amelia had expected, a bustling hub of commerce and activity. Steamboats crowded the Mississippi River docks, their whistles echoing across the water. Buildings of brick and wood-lined muddy streets where wagons, horses, and pedestrians competed for space. The air smelled of smoke and river water and possibility. Arthur Warren's new property was indeed on the north side of town, a good-sized lot with a partially constructed building that would become the trading post. Behind it stood a small house that needed repairs but was structurally sound. Amelia threw herself into the work of settling in, scrubbing floors and walls, hanging curtains she had sewn during the journey, arranging their furniture and belongings. But even as she worked, her mind kept drifting back to Mason Drake. She found herself sketching him from memory, trying to capture the planes of his face, the way he had looked at his horses with such evident affection, the quiet strength in his bearing. She wondered if he would truly come to visit, or if that moment by the creek had been just that, a moment, gone as quickly as it had appeared. 2 weeks passed. The trading post opened for business, selling everything from flour and coffee to tools and fabric. Arthur proved to have a knack for commerce, and customers came steadily. Amelia helped in the store, keeping the books and managing inventory, but she also carved out time for her art. She discovered a small gallery in town run by a French expatriate named Monsieur Beaumont, who expressed interest in displaying some of her work. It was a Thursday afternoon when Mason finally appeared. Amelia was in the trading post, arranging bolts of fabric on a shelf when the bell above the door chimed. She turned to offer a greeting and froze, her heart suddenly pounding. Mason stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking somehow both completely out of place and perfectly right. He had cleaned up, wearing a pressed shirt and a vest, his hair neatly combed, but there was dust on his boots that spoke of the ride into town. "Miss Warren," he said, his eyes finding hers immediately. "I hope I am not intruding." "Not at all," Amelia managed, setting down the fabric with hands that had started trembling. "I am glad you came." Arthur emerged from the back room, his expression brightening with recognition. "Mr. Drake, good to see you again. Are you here for supplies?" "Among other things," Mason said diplomatically. "I was hoping I might speak with your daughter, if you can spare her for a bit." Arthur's eyes flicked between them, and Amelia could see him processing the request, weighing protective instincts against the evidence of Mason's character. "I suppose that would be all right," he said slowly. "Stay where people can see you, though. Amelia, be back before dark." "Yes, Papa," Amelia said, already untying her apron and smoothing her hair. They walked through St. Louis together, keeping a respectable distance but stealing glances at each other like schoolchildren with a secret. Mason pointed out various landmarks: the courthouse, the market square, the levee where goods from all over the world arrived by steamboat. But mostly they talked about everything and nothing, their conversation flowing as naturally as the river beside them. "I have thought about you," Mason admitted as they stood watching a steamboat load cargo. "These past 2 weeks. I kept meaning to come sooner, but there was work at the ranch, and I wanted to make sure I could take a full day." "I thought about you too," Amelia confessed, feeling bold. "I have been sketching you from memory. I hope that does not seem strange." He turned to her, something warm and wondering in his expression. "Could I see?" They found a bench in a small park, and Amelia pulled out the sketchbook she had started carrying everywhere. She opened it to the pages where she had drawn him, feeling vulnerable in a way she never had when showing her work before. These sketches were different. They revealed not just artistic skill but feeling, the tenderness with which she had tried to capture every detail of his face. Mason studied the drawings in silence, his expression unreadable. When he finally looked up, his eyes were intense. "Is this truly how you see me?" "Yes," Amelia whispered. "You make me look better than I am." "I draw what I see," she insisted. "Nothing more, nothing less." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and rough against hers. "I have never met anyone like you, Amelia Warren. You see the world differently than anyone I know. You find beauty in things other people walk right past." "You do the same," she said. "With your horses, I saw it that day, you do not just train them, you understand them, you honor who they are." They sat there, hands clasped, watching the world move around them. Steamboats bellowed, wagons rattled past. Somewhere a dog barked and children laughed, but Amelia felt cocooned in a bubble of peace, as if nothing existed beyond this bench, this moment, this man beside her. Over the following months, Mason came to St. Louis as often as he could, usually twice a week. Sometimes he stayed only a few hours. Other times he remained overnight, boarding at a local inn, so they could spend more time together. Arthur watched their growing attachment with mixed feelings. He liked Mason, respected his work ethic and honesty, but he also worried about his daughter attaching herself to a rancher whose life would be hard and uncertain. "Are you sure about this?" Arthur asked Amelia one evening after Mason had left to return to his ranch. "Life on a ranch is not easy. It is isolated, difficult work. You have always lived in cities with culture and society. Can you truly be happy out there?" "I can be happy with him," Amelia said simply. "Wherever that is." In October, Mason took Amelia to see the Drake Ranch for the first time. They rode together on Ranger, Amelia seated in front of Mason now, secure within the circle of his arms. The journey took several hours, but Amelia did not mind. She loved the feel of the horse moving beneath them, the endless sky overhead, the gradual transformation of the landscape from settled farmland to wilder, more open country. The ranch house appeared as they crested a hill, a sturdy structure of wood and stone with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Corrals and outbuildings spread around it, and beyond them stretched pastures where cattle and horses grazed. It was beautiful in its simplicity, its honest functionality. "This is home," Mason said, and Amelia could hear both pride and vulnerability in his voice. She met the ranch hands, a crew of 4 men who treated Mason with evident respect and regard. There was Tom, the oldest at 40, who had worked for Mason's uncle before him. Young Billy, barely 18, who wanted to learn everything about horses. Carlos, a quiet Mexican man who was brilliant with a rope. And Samuel, a freed slave who had found his way to Missouri after the war and proved himself invaluable with cattle. The men tipped their hats to Amelia with varying degrees of shyness and curiosity. She could tell they were surprised that their boss had brought a woman to the ranch, and she wondered what Mason had told them about her, if anything. Mason showed her everything. The barn where he kept his best breeding stock. The training pen where he worked with young horses. The tack room that smelled of leather and oil. The chicken coop and vegetable garden that provided fresh eggs and produce. He walked her through the house itself, clearly nervous about her reaction. It was sparsely furnished but clean and well maintained. The main room held a fireplace, a table with chairs and a few comfortable pieces. The kitchen was functional if basic. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs, and Mason showed her only his uncle's old room now used for storage, carefully avoiding his own. "It needs a woman's touch," he admitted. "I am not much for decorating, but it is solid. The roof does not leak. The walls keep out the cold. It is a good foundation." Amelia moved to the window, looking out over the land that rolled away in all directions. She could see cattle dotting distant pastures, horses running in a far corral, the creek glinting silver in the afternoon light. "It is perfect," she said honestly. "I can see myself here." Mason came to stand behind her, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Could you really? I know it is different from anything you have known. There are no galleries here, no theaters or concerts. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. Winter can be lonely." Amelia turned to face him, and the intensity of her feelings must have shown in her expression because his breath caught. "I have been lonely in rooms full of people," she said. "Surrounded by all the culture and society Papa thinks I need, but I have never felt lonely when I am with you. Not for a single moment." "Amelia," Mason breathed, and then his hands were cupping her face and he was kissing her for the first time. It was gentle and fierce all at once, tender and hungry, and Amelia felt as if she were melting and igniting simultaneously. Her hands clutched at his shirt, and she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing of the past months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mason rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said, the words rough and honest. "I have loved you since that day I found you sketching my horses. I love the way you see the world. I love your talent and your courage and the way you light up when you talk about things that matter to you. I love everything about you, and I want to spend my life making you happy. Will you marry me?" Amelia's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of pure joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Mason, I love you too, so much it frightens me sometimes." They kissed again, sealing the promise, and when they finally drew apart, both were smiling so widely their faces hurt. Convincing Arthur proved easier than Amelia had feared. He could see how happy she was, how Mason looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. The wedding was planned for December, giving them time to prepare properly. Amelia worked with a local seamstress to create a dress of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Mason ordered a new suit from the tailor. They would marry in the small church in St. Louis, with a reception in the trading post cleared out and decorated for the occasion. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a flurry of activity. Amelia began moving some of her belongings to the ranch, working with Mason to make the house feel more like a home. She hung curtains, arranged furniture, added small touches that transformed the stark spaces into something warm and welcoming. She set up a studio in the spare bedroom upstairs, with a large window facing north that provided perfect light for painting. Mason surprised her by building easels and shelves himself, working late into the evenings to have them ready. He encouraged her to fill the house with her art, and soon sketches and paintings adorned the walls, bringing life and color to every room. The wedding day dawned clear and cold. Snow had fallen the night before, blanketing St. Louis in white. Amelia dressed with help from two women she had befriended in town, her hands shaking slightly as they fastened the dozens of tiny buttons running down her back. When she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes found Mason immediately. He stood at the front of the church in his new suit, his expression a mixture of awe and joy, and something almost like disbelief, as if he could not quite believe this was really happening. Tom, Billy, Carlos, and Samuel sat in the front pew on his side, all cleaned up and looking slightly uncomfortable in their Sunday best. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love and cherish each other through all the years to come. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Mason kissed her, Amelia felt as if her heart might burst with happiness. The reception was a lively affair. Arthur had spared no expense, providing abundant food and drink. Someone produced a fiddle and dancing began. Mason proved surprisingly light on his feet, spinning Amelia around the makeshift dance floor until she was dizzy with laughter. As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave for the ranch, Arthur pulled Amelia aside. His eyes were suspiciously bright as he held her hands. "You are sure?" he asked one final time. "This is what you want?" "I have never been more sure of anything," Amelia said, embracing him tightly. "I love you, Papa. Thank you for letting me find my own path." "Be happy," Arthur whispered into her hair. "That is all I have ever wanted for you." Mason had prepared a sleigh for the journey back to the ranch, with thick furs and heated bricks to keep them warm. They glided through the snowy landscape under a sky brilliant with stars, Amelia nestled against her husband's side. The word sent a thrill through her. Husband. Mason was her husband now. The ranch house was warm when they arrived, a fire already burning in the hearth thanks to Tom, who had ridden ahead to prepare things. Amelia stood in the main room, still in her wedding dress, looking around at what was now truly her home. Mason came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Welcome home, Mrs. Drake." "That will take some getting used to," Amelia said with a smile, leaning back against him. "But I like the sound of it." Their first months of marriage were a period of adjustment and discovery. Amelia learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and long days, the constant work required to keep everything running. She helped where she could, cooking meals for the hands, tending the garden, even learning basic veterinary care for the animals. But Mason never expected her to give up her art. He made sure she had time every day to paint and draw, and he loved watching her work, seeing the world transform beneath her skilled hands. She began a series of paintings depicting life on the ranch, capturing moments both grand and small. A cowboy silhouetted against the sunset, horses running through morning mist, the play of light across empty pastures. Monsieur Beaumont in St. Louis was thrilled with the new work. He sold several pieces almost immediately and commissioned more. Word spread, and soon Amelia had more requests than she could easily fulfill. The irony was not lost on her. She had left the culture and society of Boston only to find that her art was more in demand here, where she painted from the heart about things she genuinely loved. Winter gave way to spring, and the ranch burst into new life. Foals were born, their legs wobbly and uncertain at first but quickly growing strong. Amelia spent hours sketching them, delighting in their antics and personalities. Mason taught her to ride properly, and soon she had her own horse, a gentle mare named Willow who seemed to understand Amelia's inexperience and forgive it. They would ride together in the evenings, exploring the land that stretched in all directions around them. Mason showed her secret places. A grove of cottonwoods where deer came to drink, a rocky outcropping that provided a view for miles, the place where the creek widened into a swimming hole, perfect for hot summer days. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, Amelia told Mason her news. "I am with child," she said softly, watching his face for his reaction. For a moment, Mason simply stared at her, and then his expression transformed into pure joy. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "Are you sure?" "When? The doctor in town confirmed it yesterday. He thinks the baby will come in January." Amelia laughed, tears streaming down her face. "We are going to be parents, Mason." "You have already given me so much," Mason said, his voice thick with emotion. "More happiness than I ever dreamed possible, and now this. A child, our child." He knelt before her, pressing his ear to her still flat belly as if he might hear something. Amelia ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man, for the life they were building together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Amelia continued to paint, though she tired more easily as the months went on. Mason fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest, bringing her special treats from town, reading to her in the evenings from books of poetry and adventure stories. As her belly grew round and full, Amelia painted a series of sketches documenting the changes, wanting to remember every moment of this transformation. She also prepared the second upstairs bedroom as a nursery, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, arranging the cradle that Mason built with his own hands. The ranch hands treated her with a gentleness that was touching. They helped with heavier chores without being asked, and Billy began leaving wildflowers on the porch in shy offerings. Even the animals seemed to sense something special was happening. Willow grew protective, refusing to let anyone but Amelia and Mason near when they went riding. In November, Arthur came to stay for an extended visit, wanting to be nearby when his grandchild arrived. He and Mason worked together on various projects around the ranch, and Amelia was touched to see the genuine friendship developing between them. Her father seemed more relaxed here than she had ever seen him in the city, as if the open land and honest work agreed with him. The first snow fell in early December, and by Christmas, the ranch was blanketed in white. They celebrated quietly, just the three of them, with a small tree decorated with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments. Mason gave Amelia a beautiful set of painting brushes he had ordered from Chicago, the finest quality available. She gave him a portrait she had painted of him with Ranger, capturing the bond between man and horse. January arrived with bitter cold. Amelia grew increasingly uncomfortable, her back aching, sleep difficult to find. Mason rarely left her side except when absolutely necessary, his concern evident in every gesture. The labor began on a Sunday morning, 3 weeks into the new year of 1876. It was a long and difficult process, lasting through the day and into the night. Mason held Amelia's hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement even as his own face went pale with worry. Arthur paced downstairs, occasionally bringing fresh water or clean linens as the doctor directed. Finally, in the early hours of Monday morning, a baby's cry pierced the air. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Amelia barely registered the doctor's words at first. "A boy, Mr. Drake. You have a son." Mason's face, when she focused on it, was wet with tears. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You did it. You are incredible. I love you so much." The doctor placed the baby in her arms, and Amelia looked down at the tiny face, the dark hair, the eyes that would probably change color but for now were a murky blue. He was perfect. Absolutely perfect. "What should we name him?" Mason asked, one finger stroking the baby's impossibly small hand. They had discussed names endlessly over the past months without ever quite deciding. But looking at her son now, Amelia knew. "Matthew," she said. "Matthew Arthur Drake, after both his grandfathers." Mason's uncle had been named Matthew, and Amelia knew it would honor his memory while also acknowledging the man who had raised and loved Mason. The middle name was for her father, who had supported her even when he had worried about her choices. "Matthew," Mason repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Matthew Drake." The baby's hand wrapped around Mason's finger with surprising strength, and Mason laughed, the sound slightly choked. "He is strong. Look at that grip." Arthur was permitted upstairs to meet his grandson, and the tough merchant who had crossed half a continent to build a business wept openly at the sight. He held Matthew with surprising tenderness, whispering promises to spoil him terribly. The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Matthew proved to be a healthy baby with a good appetite and strong lungs. He exercised frequently. Amelia and Mason took turns walking him at night when he fussed, bleary-eyed but too enchanted to truly mind. Amelia's art necessarily took a backseat during those early months, but she found new subjects in motherhood. Quick sketches of Matthew sleeping, nursing, discovering his hands. She documented every milestone, every precious moment, knowing how quickly he would change. Mason was a devoted father, talking to Matthew constantly as he went about ranch work, carrying him in a sling Amelia fashioned so the baby could be close. The ranch hands became honorary uncles, each finding ways to help. Tom carved toys. Billy sang slightly off-key lullabies. Carlos taught Matthew Spanish words he could not yet understand. Samuel told stories of his own children, grown now and scattered across the country. Spring arrived again, bringing renewal and hope. Matthew grew rapidly, his personality emerging. He was curious and determined, frustrated when his body would not yet do what his mind wanted. He loved the horses, his face lighting up whenever he saw them. On a warm April evening, with Matthew settled in his cradle and the ranch quiet around them, Amelia and Mason sat together on the porch. It had become their ritual, this end-of-day communion, sharing the events and thoughts of their days. "You ever regret it?" Mason asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Leaving Boston, giving up the life you could have had there?" Amelia considered the question seriously before answering. "I do not think I gave up anything," she said finally. "I traded one possibility for another, and this possibility, this reality, is better than anything I could have imagined. I have you. I have Matthew. I have my art and this beautiful land and a purpose to my days. How could I regret any of that?" "I think about that day I found you sketching," Mason said. "How close I came to not riding out to check on the horses. I almost sent Tom instead, and if I had, we might never have met." "But you did not," Amelia said, turning to kiss him. "You rode out yourself, you found me. And I captured you on paper, but somehow you captured my heart in the same quiet moment." "I love you," Mason said, the words as fresh and true as the first time he had spoken them. "More every day if that is possible." "It is possible," Amelia assured him. "I know because I feel the same." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and was answered. The horses moved in their pastures, dark shapes against the darkening land. Inside the house, Matthew slept peacefully, unaware of how loved he was, how cherished. The years unfolded with their mixture of joy and challenge. The ranch prospered under Mason's careful management. His horse breeding program gained recognition throughout Missouri and beyond, with buyers coming from as far as Kansas and Illinois to purchase his stock. Amelia's paintings sold steadily, providing additional income and bringing her personal satisfaction. Matthew grew into a bright, energetic child who adored horses as much as his father did. By age 3, he was riding in front of Mason on Ranger, fearless and laughing. By 5, he had his own small pony and was learning to care for it properly. When Matthew was 4, Amelia became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. In the spring of 1881, she gave birth to twin girls they named Margaret and Alice. The ranch house suddenly felt both fuller and more complete, echoing with children's laughter and the controlled chaos of a growing family. Mason proved as devoted to his daughters as he was to his son, utterly wrapped around their tiny fingers from the moment they were born. Amelia would often find him in the nursery, holding one or both of them, singing softly or simply watching them sleep with an expression of wonder. Matthew took his role as big brother seriously, insisting on helping with the babies and fiercely protective of them. As the twins grew, they followed him everywhere, their own personalities emerging. Margaret was bold and adventurous, always getting into things. Alice was gentler, more observant, preferring to watch and think before acting. Arthur remained a frequent visitor, dividing his time between St. Louis and the ranch. The trading post continued to thrive, now managed by a partner Arthur had taken on, which gave him more freedom. He delighted in his grandchildren, and they adored him in return. When Matthew was 7 and the twins were 3, tragedy struck. Arthur suffered a heart attack while in St. Louis and died quickly, without pain. Amelia grieved deeply for the father who had given her so much, who had supported her dreams even when they took her far from him. Mason held her through the tears, and the children, sensing her sadness, were especially gentle and sweet. They buried Arthur in the small cemetery outside St. Louis, next to Amelia's mother. Standing at the graveside, Amelia felt the weight of loss but also gratitude. Her father had lived long enough to see her truly happy, to know his grandchildren, to find peace himself in his final years. "He was a good man," Mason said quietly as they walked back to the wagon. Matthew held his hand on one side while Amelia carried Alice. Tom had Margaret, who had fallen asleep against his shoulder. "He was," Amelia agreed, "and he lives on in the children, in the business he built, in the choices he supported me in making." Life continued its forward march. The children grew and the ranch evolved with them. Mason built a larger barn to accommodate the increasing number of horses. They added on to the house, creating more bedrooms and a dedicated studio for Amelia where she could work undisturbed. Matthew showed an aptitude for working with horses that rivaled his father's. By age 12, he was helping train young stock, demonstrating patience and intuition beyond his years. The twins developed their own interests. Margaret loved working with the cattle, unafraid of the large animals and skilled with a rope. Alice shared Amelia's artistic bent, showing real talent for drawing and painting. When Matthew was 15, Mason began teaching him the business side of ranching, sharing his knowledge about breeding lines, financial management, and long-term planning. It was clear the ranch would continue in capable hands when the time came, but that time still felt far away. Mason, now in his early 40s, was still strong and vital. Amelia, approaching 40 herself, had lost none of her beauty or artistic vision. If anything, her work had deepened and matured, reflecting the rich experiences of her life. They stood together one evening in late summer, watching their children play near the creek. Matthew was teaching the twins to skip stones, their laughter carrying on the warm air. The scene could have come from one of Amelia's paintings, golden light and innocent joy. "Do you remember what you said once?" Amelia asked. "About the land demanding honesty." "I do," Mason replied. "You were right. This life has taught me to be more myself than I ever was before. To trust my instincts and follow my heart, to find strength I did not know I had." "You always had that strength," Mason said. "You just needed space to let it grow." The children's voices rose in friendly argument about who had skipped their stone the farthest. Matthew was laughing, arbitrating with the wisdom of an older sibling. The twins were already plotting to combine forces against him. "We have built something good here," Amelia said softly. "Not just the ranch or the house, but a family, a life, something real and true and worth everything it cost." "The best things always cost something," Mason agreed, "but the returns are beyond measure." As the sun sank lower, painting the world in shades of amber and rose, they called the children in for supper. The family gathered around the table Mason's uncle had built decades ago, now laden with food from their own land. They held hands while Mason said grace, thanking God for blessings received and asking protection for those they loved. After the meal, while Amelia helped the twins prepare for bed, Matthew and Mason went out to check on a mare expected to foal soon. Alice insisted on a story, so Amelia read from a favorite book, doing different voices that made both girls giggle. Margaret fell asleep first as usual, her energy finally depleted. Alice lasted a bit longer, her eyes drifting closed as Amelia's voice wove the familiar tale. Tucking them in, Amelia stood for a moment looking at her daughters. They had Mason's coloring but her features, a blending of their parents that was uniquely their own. She thought about the girl she had been, sketching horses by a creek, and the woman she had become. Both were her, yet she had been transformed by love and life into something she could never have imagined. The years continued their steady progression. Matthew grew into a fine young man, tall and capable, with his father's quiet confidence and his mother's artistic eye. He courted and married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, a smart young woman named Sarah who fit seamlessly into the Drake family. The twins, inseparable as children, remained close as they grew. Margaret eventually married a cattle buyer and moved to Denver, though she visited often. Alice stayed at the ranch, building a reputation as an artist in her own right, her style different from her mother's but equally skilled. Mason and Amelia grew older together, their love deepening rather than fading with time. They became grandparents when Matthew and Sarah had children, and the ranch house once again filled with the sounds of young voices. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Mason surprised Amelia with a gift. He had commissioned a local craftsman to build a beautiful display case, and inside it, he had placed the very first sketch she had made of his horses, the one she had been working on the day they met. "I asked you for it back then," Mason said as Amelia stared at the drawing, tears streaming down her face. "Do you remember? And you gave it to me. I have kept it all these years, but it deserves to be seen. You captured more than horses that day. You captured possibility. The beginning of everything. I love you," Amelia whispered, embracing him. "Just as much now as then, more if that is possible." "It is possible," Mason said, echoing her words from long ago. "I know because I feel the same." They hung the display case in the main room where everyone could see it, a reminder of where their story had begun. Visitors would ask about it, and Amelia would tell the tale of a girl from Boston who had stopped to sketch horses and found her whole life changed. As they moved into their 50s and beyond, Mason and Matthew worked together to ensure the ranch's continued success. New bloodlines were introduced carefully. Modern techniques were adopted where they made sense while maintaining the core values that had always guided them. The Drake Ranch became known throughout the West as a source of exceptional horses, and the name carried weight in any conversation about quality stock. Amelia's art evolved as well. She began teaching, passing on her skills to Alice and other young artists who sought her guidance. She published a book of her Western paintings, with accompanying text describing ranch life and the beauty of the Missouri landscape. It sold well and brought her recognition she accepted with grace but did not particularly seek. What mattered to her was here. Her family, her home, the land that had become part of her soul. On their 40th anniversary, the family gathered for a celebration. Matthew and Sarah were there with their 4 children. Margaret came from Denver with her husband and 3 boys. Alice had married a few years earlier to a kind teacher from St. Louis, and they brought their infant daughter. The house and yard were full of people and laughter and love. Mason, his hair now silver but his eyes still that same gray-green, stood with Amelia watching the chaos with bemused affection. "Quite a legacy," Amelia said, gesturing at the assembled family. "Ours," Mason agreed, pulling her close. "Built on a foundation of love and hard work and faith in each other." That night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, they sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. The land stretched away into darkness, familiar and beloved. "If you could go back," Mason asked, "knowing everything that would happen, all the joy and sorrow and struggle, would you do it again? Would you still sketch my horses that day?" Amelia did not hesitate. "In a heartbeat. Every moment has led to this, to us, to the life we have built. I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Mason said softly. "You gave me everything, Amelia, purpose and love and a family. You took a lonely cowboy and made him whole." "We made each other whole," Amelia corrected. "That is what love does, it completes us." They sat in peaceful silence, holding hands, watching the stars. After a while they went inside together, climbing the stairs to the bedroom they had shared for 4 decades. The house settled around them, full of memories and promise. The seasons turned and turned again. Mason and Amelia moved more slowly now, their bodies bearing the marks of age and hard work, but their minds remained sharp and their love constant. They took joy in their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the continuation of the life they had built. Matthew ran the ranch now with his own son learning at his side, the fourth generation to work this land. Alice's paintings hung in galleries across the country, her talent finally receiving the recognition it deserved. Margaret's sons had started their own cattle operation in Colorado, carrying forward the lessons learned at their grandfather's knee. On a quiet morning in the spring of 1915, when they were both in their late 60s, Amelia and Mason rode out together on horses descended from the original bloodlines Mason had so carefully cultivated. They moved at an easy pace, comfortable in their saddles despite their years, heading toward the creek where they had first met. The cottonwood tree was still there, larger now, its branches spreading wide. They dismounted carefully, tying the horses, and walked to the spot where Amelia had sat sketching more than 40 years before. "Can you believe it has been so long?" Amelia asked, settling onto the grass with Mason's help. "Some days it feels like yesterday," Mason said, easing down beside her. "I can still see you so clearly, bent over that sketchbook, so absorbed in what you were doing. The way the light hit your hair, the concentration on your face. I can see you too," Amelia said, "standing there in your dusty riding clothes, looking at me like you were not quite sure I was real. I think I fell in love with you in that moment, though I did not recognize it yet." "I knew," Mason admitted, "or at least some part of me did. I looked at you and thought, there she is, the person I have been waiting for without knowing I was waiting." They sat together, memories washing over them. The first kiss, the wedding, Matthew's birth and the twins, every milestone and moment, big and small, that had filled their years together. The laughter and tears, the struggles overcome and victories celebrated. "I am tired," Amelia said eventually, leaning against Mason's shoulder, "but it is a good tired, the kind that comes from a life well lived." "We have been blessed," Mason agreed, his arm around her. "More than we probably deserved. We worked for it," Amelia countered. "We chose each other every day. That matters." As the sun climbed higher, warming the air around them, they rose and returned to the horses. The ride back to the ranch house was slower than the journey out, but neither minded. There was no hurry. They had all the time they needed. Their final years were gentle ones. Surrounded by family, respected in the community, secure in the knowledge that what they had built would continue, they found peace. Mason's health began to fail first, his heart growing weak. The doctor said there was nothing to be done except make him comfortable. Amelia nursed him devotedly, reading to him, holding his hand, telling stories of their life together. The family took turns visiting, knowing the end was near. On a warm summer evening, with Amelia beside him and his children nearby, Mason Drake drew his last breath. His final words were simple and perfect. "Love you. Always." Amelia wept but also felt gratitude. They had been given so much time, so many years together. Not everyone was so blessed. She buried him in the small family cemetery on the ranch, beneath a stone that read simply, "Mason Drake. Beloved husband, father, grandfather. He lived with honor and loved with his whole heart." The grief was profound, but Amelia had her children and grandchildren to sustain her. She continued to paint, finding solace in the work. She documented the ranch one final time, creating a series that captured every beloved detail. The barn, the corrals, the house, the creek where it had all begun. Alice stayed close, moving back into the ranch house to care for her mother. Matthew visited daily, bringing his grandchildren to brighten Amelia's days. Even Margaret came for an extended stay, and the house echoed with memories and love. On a crisp autumn morning 2 years after Mason's death, Amelia asked to be taken to the creek. Alice helped her into the wagon, bundling her against the cool air. They rode slowly, Alice handling the horses with the skill learned from her father. At the creek, Alice helped Amelia to the familiar spot beneath the cottonwood. She brought out her mother's sketchbook and pencils, placing them in hands that trembled but still held strength. "Would you like me to stay?" Alice asked gently. "No, dear," Amelia said with a smile. "I want to be alone for a bit, just come back in an hour or so." Alice hesitated, worried, but she respected her mother's wishes. She drove the wagon a short distance away and waited, watching from afar. Amelia opened her sketchbook to a fresh page. Her hands were not as steady as they once were, and her eyes not as sharp, but the vision was still there. She began to draw, capturing the horses grazing in the distance, descendants of those first animals she had sketched so long ago. As she worked, she felt Mason's presence beside her, as real as if he were actually there. She could almost hear his voice, see his smile, feel the warmth of his hand in hers. The boundaries between past and present seemed to blur, and for a moment she was young again, sitting in this exact spot, about to have her life transformed by a cowboy who loved his horses. The sketch took shape beneath her hands, and when it was complete, Amelia looked at it with satisfaction. It was good. Not her best work perhaps, but honest and true, capturing the essence of what she wanted to convey. She closed the sketchbook and set it aside. Leaning back against the cottonwood, she watched the play of light on water, the movement of horses in the distance, the vast sky overhead. She felt no fear, only a deep peace and readiness. When Alice returned an hour later, she found her mother as she had left her, sitting beneath the tree with a slight smile on her face. But when Alice drew closer, she realized the truth. Amelia had passed quietly, peacefully, returning to the earth and to the man she had loved in the place where their story began. They buried Amelia beside Mason, the stones side by side as they had been in life. The entire community turned out for the funeral, paying respects to a woman who had brought beauty and grace to their rough land. Her paintings hung in museums and private collections across the country, but her greatest legacy was the family she had nurtured and the love she had shared. Matthew Drake continued running the ranch for many more years before passing it to his own son. The horses bearing the Drake name remained sought after, their quality a testament to Mason's vision and careful breeding. Alice became a renowned artist in her own right, though she always credited her mother with teaching her to truly see. Margaret's descendants spread across the West, carrying forward the values and strength they had learned. The ranch house still stood decades later, modified and updated but fundamentally the same. Visitors could see the display case with that first sketch, Amelia's signature faint but still visible in the corner. They could walk to the creek and stand beneath the cottonwood, imagining a young woman with a sketchbook and a cowboy who found her there. The love story of Mason Drake and Amelia Warren became part of local legend, passed down through generations. It was told to children as a fairy tale, to teenagers as proof that true love existed, to adults as a reminder that the best things in life often come when we least expect them. In the end, it was a simple story of two people who found each other in a quiet moment and chose to build a life together. They had worked hard, loved deeply, and created something that lasted far beyond their own lives. They had known sorrow and struggle, but also profound joy. They had been present for each other through every season, every challenge, every triumph. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived in Missouri, some on the ranch itself, others scattered across the state and beyond. They carried the blood of both Mason and Amelia, inheriting traits from each. Some had Mason's quiet strength and way with animals. Others had Amelia's artistic vision and gentle wisdom. All of them knew the story of how their ancestors had met, how a cowboy had found a woman sketching his horses, and how she had captured his heart in the same quiet moment. The story had become a touchstone, a reminder of what mattered most. Not wealth or fame or power, but love, connection, family, the courage to follow your heart even when it leads somewhere unexpected, the wisdom to recognize a gift when it appears, and the strength to hold on to it through whatever comes. And on quiet evenings, when the light slants golden across the Missouri plains and horses graze peacefully near the creek, it is not hard to imagine two figures sitting beneath the cottonwood tree. A young woman with a sketchbook, a cowboy watching her work. The moment before everything changed, preserved forever in memory and love. The creek still flows as it did then, indifferent to human joy and sorrow, marking time with its eternal music. The cottonwood still spreads its branches wide, offering shade and shelter. The horses still graze, beautiful and strong, legacy of a man's dream and dedication. The land endures, holding the stories of all who have loved it. And somewhere in that timeless space where love transcends death and memory becomes eternal, Mason and Amelia are together still. Forever young in that perfect moment when their eyes first met and recognized something fundamental and true. Forever bound by the choice they made to join their lives and build something beautiful from the raw material of hope and hard work. Their story was complete, every thread tied off. Every promise kept, every dream realized in ways both expected and surprising. They had lived fully and loved deeply. They had raised children who carried forward their values. They had left the world better and richer for their presence in it, and that is all any love story really needs. A beginning filled with possibility, a middle rich with challenge and growth, an ending that brings peace and completion. Mason and Amelia had all three, and in having them, they had everything that mattered. The sun set on the Drake Ranch as it had countless times before, painting the sky in colors no artist could fully capture. The horses settled for the night. The house grew quiet. The stars emerged one by one to keep their eternal watch. And the love that had begun by a creek so many years ago lived on in all who remembered, all who told the tale, all who believed that true love was not just a fantasy, but a real and achievable grace. Mason had found Amelia sketching his horses, and she had captured his heart in the same quiet moment. Everything else had flowed from there, as natural and inevitable as the creek finding its way to the river to the sea, two souls finding their way home to each other.